Hello and welcome to the show. For this week's Canyon Rally, I have got some crazy covets. These are using the variety mod for BeamNG Drive. It gives them some, quite frankly, ridiculous configurations, but they seemed like fun to try and take down this rally stage. We are starting with the Gymkhana covet, essentially. So very, very high powered, all-wheel drive. Suspension is not quite as rally orientated as I had slightly hoped. We got up to 106 miles an hour before we reached the crest at turn 1. However, on the landing, things go a little bit awry as it bounces its way across the dirt, tumbling and rolling and eventually coming to a halt. The car does still kind of ish function. Unfortunately, it's kind of beached, basically. So we have got wheels spinning. I can't get it out of this position, however it isn't slipping down the cliff, well, that much anyway, so yeah, that's not really going to be going anywhere fast. And trying to figure out quite what I could and couldn't get away with over that crest was always going to be an interesting thing. The front bumper fell off incredibly easy as well, going underneath the car, causing me to have some issues getting it slowed down for the second corner, and well, the crash barrier is mean. I've hit that a few times with vehicles. This Corvette, though, just completely and utterly annihilates that rear corner. So yeah, you certainly have to be a little bit careful with this car. On the whole, quite an easy vehicle to drive. Could get a tad twitchy, mind. Of course, being all-wheel drive, I think that's quite a high front bias in this all-wheel drive setup. Kind of allows you to chuck the car through a corner and the front try and drag it round so you don't have too many twitchy oversteer moments. However, on that one, I think I might have just put the rear wheel on the grass and that was enough to cause a twitch at the wrong moment at quite high speeds, and well, we end up down the mountain on fire. Might not have slowed down enough for that that turn 1 crash. Just yeah, I wasn't quite paying attention. I forgot just how quick this car was and braked far too late, went soaring into the scenery. The sign caught us and made a very interesting shaped cover. Unfortunately, the steering doesn't work. It does still drive. The steering was all buckled up, but yeah, that's quite an interesting shape of covet. Certainly you could throw it around the corners, not quite as easily though as you could with the ultra high powered cars. On this particular run, trying to get on the throttle a little bit too soon, just understeers a bit wide, and that is going to cause issues to that part of the track. Once again, we go rolling our way down this hill. The Covet does roll quite nicely, gotta say, and yeah, it's a bit of a sorry sight. Although amazingly, it is still working. After I say it is still working, I mean it's still got drive. The steering is completely knackered. I get it a little bit wrong across the dirt section, and that actually breaks the rear suspension, which makes the car all sorts of difficult to try and stop. And yeah, we're not going to stop into that hairpin. And another problem that I didn't foresee with this car, the brakes. We're actually cooking the brakes about 3/4 of the way down this run. It was completely broken in terms of handling. I went to carry on, but it was too buggered, too bad at steering damage would see me go off, and pretty damn impressive fireball. I think that might be the most fire I've had from a car, certainly in this series. But yeah, cooking the brakes was a big issue. I just mispositioned my Covet on that run. Couldn't get it corrected in time. Again, with a car as powerful as this, as fast accelerating as this, it is quite easy to get it into trouble and not have enough time to rectify it, such as that would, and cause large, sort of very quick movements with the steering when you're traveling at high speeds. Could equally cause big problems for the car. Now, I couldn't be too aggressive with these jumps. I knew the suspension was not going to be quite up to it. I couldn't take, the big 70-80 mile an hour landings, certainly across that first crest, so had to be a tad more cautious. Now, we could take decent speed through these next couple of corners up towards the bridge jump. This one could take it fast, although there was always a risk in taking that one quickly. Sometimes you got away with a nice landing like I did here, other times it could just bounce the car about all over the place. We do lose the front bumper, but that falls out the other side. Don't quite have the same, as I said, the same confidence to really throw that car into the pond hairpin there. You can kind of get away with it, but not quite as nicely as the ultra-high powered cars. Now we're starting to have braking issues. Yes, a fair bit of that smoke is coming from the damaged radiator. However, the brakes are starting to cook, and it is now starting to get increasingly difficult to slow this car down, just as we are getting to the really bloody fast parts of the lap. So I am very early on the brakes into these final few corners just to make sure that we get the car slowed down. Starts to get a little bit of oversteer that I would rather not have through that section. Do get away with it, can run towards the line, 110 miles an hour as we cross the line for the Covet. That is some good going. You see here, I'm fully on the brakes, and I can't get the car, the brakes don't lock, and the car doesn't really slow down very well. You can see the smoke not only coming from the engine, you can see some of it coming from the rear wheels briefly. Yeah, we absolutely cooked the brakes. I'm surprised that on this car it didn't have kind of full-on, ventilated race brakes, or ceramic race brakes and so on. Either way, it's yeah, had some braking problems, but still made its way down the course, and certainly a mighty quick accelerating vehicle. Up next, we've got a front-wheel drive drag car, essentially. Ludicrous levels of power. We're talking absolutely stupid levels of power. Incredibly fast in a straight line. But that is all it is designed to manage with. I mean, you can see the rather odd front tyres. As we come up towards this crest here, we're doing 125 miles an hour. I get on the brakes. However, the handling is quite interesting, as, well, it just immediately tips over as we crest the hill. Yeah, it has got huge front tyres. They're incredibly grippy front tyres. While that's good in terms of putting the power down, when we try and go round corners, it can very easily cause the car to just roll over, or in this case, just going in a straight line. When I was still sort of learning driving this car, you do too vicious a steering movements, and it will just essentially grip roll its way over. I think we very nearly found our way into a completely different part of the canyon course. And turn 2, we have similar problems. I had kind of initially feared of loads and loads of understeer in such a high-powered front-wheel drive car, but the grip roll meant that you never ever had understeer, because you would never be able to go fast enough to get understeer. And once again, tried to get it slowed down into this second corner. This time the car actually does survive, surprisingly, but yeah. It is a very, very difficult vehicle to drive because you simply can't take any speed anywhere. At this stage, I'd already rolled it once on this run. Unfortunately, that had broken the suspension a little bit, so as we came to just approach the bridge, I lost the back end and the car will go around. This time, a little bit more in one piece. However, does not like the jump here whatsoever. You see the car bouncing around from side to side, and then me trying to correct it causes as much problems as the actual landing of the jump, because as I'm trying to get the car back in a straight line, because of the huge amount of grip that will suddenly go on from the front, you can get it into trouble. Amazingly made it through all of that without actually doing any real damage, and then immediately roll over about 2 seconds later. Car still working though. Still, well, it's bent up some of the wheels, and yeah. After all of that, it ends up in the crash barrier, having survived the roll. Yeah, it bent up a wheel, made it quite difficult to progress any further. Anyway, a really odd thing to be driving. There is, you might be able to notice on the bumper, I think it's on the side of the cars as well, a sticker that says do not turn at over 15 miles an hour. Well, I was trying to turn at much more than that, and I could get away with kind of 30-40 miles an hour through some of these corners. Couldn't get away with much more than that. Also, brakes were an issue on this as well. You see the car smoking heavily under braking into this hairpin. I believe that was before, in fact, you can see the radiator damage pop up just then. So I hadn't broken the radiator before that point. So once more, cooking the brakes on this car was a little bit of a problem. It wasn't the largest of issues, though, with this. Again, you see a little bit of smoke coming from the brakes as we try to get it through these fast corners. This was always likely to be a problematic area, making a little bit of a car flag, quite a low hanging car flag this time around on that tree. The aim of the game with this was just so much caution in your driving, just to make it around the corners. Whenever it did get to a nice little straight part of the course, yeah, it would absolutely fly because it was ridiculously fast. It was stupendously quick. However, you just couldn't use any of that speed through the corners. And it wasn't just the physical turning. Equally, when you're trying to get on the brakes for some of these corners, if you lock the rears, they could get away from you, and if it starts stepping out sideways, it's going to roll, because you're going to have to try and counter-steer it, in which case it's probably going to get grip and then flick around the other way and roll, or if you don't counter-steer it, you're going to spin, and then you're going to roll. So, yeah, there's no real good way of dealing with this. You have to be incredibly slow over the bridge jump. Also, it's not got the suspension or it's not got the grip to deal with it, because of the way there is just so much front grip. If it does end up bouncing around and you're trying to steer to keep it under control, chances are it's going to suddenly find a huge amount of grip at some point in all of that and just roll you over. So you had to be slow again across the dirt section here. Got to be cautious. Now we can use some of that acceleration up towards 80 miles an hour, but can't go much more. You can see it is really struggling here under braking. In fact, you can see on the telemetry I'm 100% on the brakes. The car's not got ABS, but I'm 100% on the brakes. They are just that fried. So once more, like the Jim Carter car, brakes not quite up to dealing with all of this. And I daren't go too fast down here, because if I'm going at the sort of speeds this car is capable of, we're not going to stop. We're just simply not going to stop for this corner, so I have to kind of coast my way down there to get it into these turns. Try and be delicate with the steering here. I mean, 70 miles an hour for a car that's not supposed to be turned at over 15. You've got to be really, really careful. Then we can accelerate it across the line. It does surpass 100 miles an hour, immediately snaps on me, and goes for a really big old tumble from the car. Yeah, quite again, the Covet does, in any guise, does roll pretty well, and at the speeds that this thing is capable of, and the sort of ferociousness of its rolls, if you do turn too sharply, is yeah, quite spectacular. However, it did make it to the bottom of the course. Took some patience, took a lot of sort of very fine movements with the steering, but it made it. And finally, we have got the Rolly Covet, rolling in a slightly different way to the sort of cars that I would be talking about. However, yeah, this is one of those sort of stunt vehicles. If you're driving forward in a straight line, go heavy on the brakes, it will kind of do an endo, it'll sort of catch on the metal frame, roll over, sort of do a complete front flip, and then land back on its wheels and potentially carry on. And I'm going to try and drive this car down the rally course. Now, the chances of it actually doing the rolling that it is designed to, relatively slim on this course. While there are a big braking zone down here, I'm trying my very best to stop it from doing a front flip. That's not going to be helpful for a good lap time. The big issue is, of course, to make it do a front flip, and with all of this roll cage on the top, the weight distribution is all manner of wonky, which means that yeah, it kind of falls over. So it's designed to do front flips. It ends up doing, well, my sort of rolls, basically. Where you've got to be, again, once more, it is being really, really bloody careful when you go around a corner. Because once more, like the drag Covet, you take a bit too much speed in this, it's going to fall over. I had to see what would happen if I went flat out across the jump. In actual fact, it's a little bit nicer than the drag Covet. However, doesn't really work. Again, I mean, it's not got race car suspension on this. However, because there is so much weight high up, once it bounces ever so slightly, the kind of weight transfer going on is just so much that getting it under control is nigh on impossible, and it's going to find its way off the course. So again, yeah, can't be taking speed over there. Incidentally, because of the very high centre of mass, this does roll even better than the rest of them, which is always good. I may have got on the brakes a little bit too sharply this time out. Yeah, that was really the only place that the brakes were going to be an issue, if you like. That's probably the fastest point on the circuit for this car, and perhaps one of the longer braking zones. The rest of them, it's not quite going quick enough for it to really cause too much of a problem. Managed to counter steer to stop it from rolling, but in doing that, it just gets driven off of the cliff, and then we're going to go for a very, very dizzying tumble. I mean, the remote control cars that went down here would be proud of that flip and twist and all manner of motion sicky. Got my car stuck in the bushes already on this particular run. Going up towards the bridge jump, was trying a little bit more, speed than we were doing in the drag covet, but not quite full throttle, and that doesn't work either. Yeah, it's just too much. It just finds a way of bouncing and tumbling over down there. At this point, I'd already managed to snap the rear wheel, was just continuing just out of, well, it still kind of was driving, and yeah, didn't last for long. This car did have a very weak rear, or both of the rear wheels got bent in incredibly easy, like you see with the crazy positive camber going on I think on now both of them. Did not take much at all to have the wheels at the back completely snapped up. The front ones were considerably stronger. Don't quite know what it was about this car, but yeah, they got bent in very, very easy, and that meant that yeah, you sort of scrape a wall somewhere, that was going to be run over. You couldn't get away with anything. Now, big stop for the bridge jump. Still was enough to get the car bouncing into the air, and as soon as it's done that, we're going to go for a big old tumble, bounce off of the nose. I was hoping that in one of these crashes it would land sort of perfectly on the roll cage and just sort of roll its way out of it smoothly. It didn't. It never did, unfortunately. I think a bit too much speed and a bit too much force going on in those crashes for it to quite work, and yeah, certainly the car didn't survive any of those tumbles. Amazingly, as we come up towards the fast section, everything had been going okay on this run up until we hit the bump. Now, quite a few cars have run across that bump with no issues. However, this, with that wonky weight distribution, it just pulled me off. And the most annoying thing about it was that it didn't just launch the car in the air or anything. It just pulled me off course, and it pulled me off course in such a way that I couldn't get it back onto the road. So we went tumbling off into the scenery with, once again, a broken rear wheel. It took some time getting used to this. There were certainly, some skills transferred over from driving the drag covet down here. Both of them, you had to do a very similar thing in terms of steering. It was, you've got to be incredibly smooth. It was as much caution as you really could through the corners, because while the drag covet rolled over through grip roll, if you took too much speed through the corners, this one just rolled over because of such a high centre of mass going on. So yeah, once more, it was carefully does it through the turns. On this run, I get into quite a lot of trouble bouncing it around, slightly lifted up the rear wheels off the ground, trying to slow it down. Got away with it though, amazingly did get away with it. Really had to slow it down. That's probably the slowest we've had any vehicle have to go across that bridge. Well, it would normally be a jump, not really in this, because as soon as it has an impact, has a proper sort of landing, essentially, the weight will just throw the car about off course. It's not worth it. You'll lose so much more time fighting that. Even if you get the landing and you manage to control it, you lose so much more time. You're better off just slowing down before the jump. Could get away with a little bit more speed across the dirt, and this car, I suspect probably because we weren't ever really going massively fast in it, we didn't have problems with the brakes overheating, or perhaps it has like a mega brakes to make it do the flips that it wants to. I was very cautious around this hairpin. We've seen quite a few vehicles roll over. There's normal vehicles roll over there if you hug the inside too much, so no point in risking it in something like this that, you know, will roll over very, very easily. This time making sure to avoid the fact I thought I'd done a better job of avoiding the bump than I did. It does get away with a big moment on two wheels across what is a pretty bumpy corner. We've seen a fair few vehicles go out with big crashes down there. Now it's weaved its way through the worst of the corners. It is flat out towards the finish line. I've managed to lose the back end. It's not going to matter. It is going to wibble its way across the finish line and then roll. If it crashes onto the finish line, I don't care. It made it to the finish line. I don't know why the back end just let go through that corner, but there we go. Amazingly, it did survive that crash, and I think the rear wheels were in pretty good shape considering the amount of damage they normally took, which is, yeah, very, very unlike it. Unfortunately, we did take out one of the front tyres. My plan was to now go and show what the vehicle was all about, what it was designed to go and do. Unfortunately, when I get on the brakes, it kind of twists rather than go over straight because of that punctured front left. Rather than go over straight, it kind of just twists the car around, and yeah, that broke one of the rear wheels as well. So unfortunately, couldn't quite show. You get the idea though. Once more, another interesting vehicle to drive down this Canyon Rally course. On to the times, and the fastest of the lot is unsurprisingly the Gymkhana Covet 134.2. In fact, that is a very, very good time from that car, considering it did have its issues. I mean, we cooked the brakes. For the final third of that run, we had very little in the way of braking, yet it still goes into 7th. It's only a tenth of a second down on the Pigeon Stick, a second down on the V10 Sunburst. Yeah, that's good going. That acceleration early on makes up for the braking issues further on in the run. The drag racing Covet, despite all of the difficulties with its cornering, goes into 36th place, a 156.0. It goes quicker than the lead sled and the Pigeon. I wasn't quite expecting that. It's only a couple of seconds down on the GL83 and the stanced Pazima. So, yeah, considering you have to be so slow through the corners, I was quite surprised to see it in as fast a time as that, while the Rolly Covet is down in 41st place, a 209.8. It does beat the Cement Mixer down the course, but that is about it. Even the horrendously twitchy remote control car faster than that Rolly Covet. Not particularly surprised by that one. It did like to tumble over when going around corners. Didn't have as much acceleration. You know, the drag racing car, yeah, horrible around the corners. However, the brief moments when there was a straight, it could go really rather fast. Although, again, the drag racing car also cooked its brakes. So, yeah, certainly some interesting challenges in those three to get down this course. As ever, I will put a link in the description to the mod that I have used so you can download it, have a go with it yourself. Highly recommend it. There's many, many different sorts of vehicles, different configurations for these vehicles, and thank you to the guy that suggested it in the comments of the last video. It's a fantastic, fantastic mod. That's going to be it from me, though. Thank you very much for watching, and until next time, goodbye.